One illegal trick. No pit stops. Even the pros were stunned. This secret changed racing forever.
Imagine a world where pit stops didn't exist, where the clock kept ticking and the race never paused. One mechanic dared to break every rule, bending physics and engineering to make the impossible happen. What he did changed racing forever, and it all started with a single illegal trick. Racing in the late 1960s was a high-stakes battle where every second on the track could make or break a season. Pit stops were more than mere pauses. They were vulnerabilities, opportunities for rivals to pounce, and constant reminders of the limits of machinery. Teams spent countless hours tuning engines, managing tires, and strategizing refueling, yet even the most prepared squads could lose the lead in a single lap. It was in this unforgiving environment that Henry Smokey Yunick operated, a legendary outlaw mechanic, engineer, and team owner who refused to accept conventional limits. At the center of Smokey's genius was the Chevrolet Chevelle, the powerhouse of his late 1968 NASCAR Grand National campaigns. Equipped with a Chevrolet small block V8, ranging from 327 to 427 cubic inches, the Chevelle was his main focus, a platform he molded into a race-winning machine. Every aspect of the car was optimized for speed, endurance, and ingenuity. Yet, even a car this potent faced the same universal challenge: pit stops that interrupted momentum and risked precious seconds. For most teams, these stops were unavoidable, but for Smokey, they were a puzzle waiting to be solved. Alongside the Chevelle, Smokey's 1968 Pontiac Firebird in the Trans Am series demonstrated a different kind of mastery. Running a Pontiac 303 V8, the Firebird demanded precision engineering to achieve explosive short-distance speed while maintaining stability over race conditions. Unlike the Chevelle, where endurance was critical, the Firebird required a delicate balance of power and efficiency. Smokey's role here was just as crucial. Every component, from engine to fuel line, had to serve the purpose of sustained performance with minimal interruptions. Even secondary mentions like the late 1960s Chevrolet Camaro played a supporting role in Smokey's experiments. Though not his primary focus, the Camaro served as a testbed for techniques he later perfected on his main machines. These minor supporting cars allowed him to refine engine tuning, weight distribution, and fuel delivery tricks that would ultimately define his reputation as an unparalleled innovator. Briefly, racing legends like Gordon Johncock's Daytona 500 car also weave into this narrative, a nod to the competitive environment Smokey navigated. Though only mentioned in passing, Johncock's car, likely powered by a Chevrolet V8, represented the relentless opposition every genius mechanic faced, competitors constantly raising the bar, demanding smarter, faster, and more daring solutions. The late 1960s were not just about raw horsepower, they were about creativity under pressure. For Smokey Yunick, the obstacle wasn't just keeping a car fast, it was defying the invisible constraints of pit stops, fuel limitations, and heat. Every second lost in the pits was a problem to solve. Every engine stress point, a puzzle piece in a larger strategy. His workshop was a lab of innovation, where the impossible, racing longer, harder, and faster without pausing, was methodically pursued. By the 1967 to 1968 seasons, this mindset reached its peak. Smokey's cars, chiefly the Chevelle, with the Firebird as his secondary masterpiece, began to defy expectations. Competitors watched in awe as his vehicles seemed unstoppable, laps extended, and momentum sustained. Even minor supporting cars like the Camaro contributed to his overall success, proving that no detail was too small when the goal was perfection. And all the while, Smokey quietly prepared the next leap forward. His revolutionary 11-foot 2-inch fuel line reservoir paired with cooled fuel, a design that would allow his cars to stay on track longer than anyone imagined. In the high-pressure world of late 1960s racing, Smokey Yunick didn't just solve the problems of speed and endurance, he redefined them. Every car under his care, from the Chevelle to the Firebird, was a testament to audacious engineering, meticulous planning, and an unyielding desire to beat the clock. The problem of pit stops wasn't a limit, it was the challenge that showcased Smokey's brilliance, turning constraints into a canvas for legendary innovation. The brilliance of Smokey Yunick wasn't just in building fast cars, it was in bending the rules of possibility. While other teams scrambled over conventional limitations, Smokey's mind was always a step ahead, imagining solutions that seemed audacious, even impossible. His main focus, the Chevrolet Chevelle, had already proven its dominance on the NASCAR tracks, but the constant interruptions of pit stops gnawed at every advantage. Laps lost to refueling could erase hours of meticulous preparation. It was here, at the intersection of genius and necessity, that Smokey conceived what would become his most infamous creation, the 11-foot, 2-inch diameter fuel line reservoir paired with a cooled fuel system. At first glance, the idea seemed preposterous. Who could believe that a single modification could allow a car to run longer, harder, and faster without the ritual pause that had defined racing strategy for decades? Yet Smokey didn't just dream, he engineered. He calculated every inch of tubing, every degree of fuel temperature, and every pressure differential, crafting a system that funneled a massive reserve of cooled fuel directly to the engine. The effect was immediate. The Chevelle could run laps with unprecedented continuity, effectively sidestepping the limitations of traditional refueling schedules. Where rival teams were bound by necessity, Smokey had created freedom, a mechanical loophole, so audacious it blurred the line between innovation and rebellion. Meanwhile, the 1968 Pontiac Firebird, Smokey's Trans Am masterpiece, became a secondary proving ground. Its Pontiac 303 V8 responded differently than the Chevelle's small block V8, yet the principle remained the same: extended performance without compromise. By experimenting with fuel routing and thermal management, Smokey discovered nuances unique to each engine, each chassis, and each racing series. Every minor supporting car, including the late 1960s Chevrolet Camaro, contributed insights that informed the final design, creating a web of interconnected innovations that fed back into the Chevelle and Firebird systems. It wasn't just one trick, it was an ecosystem of engineering intelligence, each component enhancing the other. The genius of the 11-foot fuel line wasn't merely in its length. Coupled with the cooled fuel system, it maintained optimal fuel density, prevented vapor lock, and minimized thermal loss, issues that plagued conventional setups and forced frequent pit stops. Smokey had essentially re-engineered the life cycle of a race car mid-event. Mechanics across the paddocks could only watch in awe, scratching their heads as his cars glided past, untouched by the limitations that bound everyone else. Where competitors accepted the grind of frequent stops, Smokey's vehicles were liberated, dancing around the track with relentless efficiency. Even legends like Gordon Johncock, in his Daytona 500 car, became silent witnesses to the shift. The mere sight of Smokey's Chevelle and Firebird blazing past, seemingly untethered from conventional race logic, inspired both envy and respect. It was more than a technical marvel. It was a psychological statement, a bold declaration that the rules of racing were merely suggestions to the right mind. Smokey didn't just build cars, he built inevitability, a seamless fusion of foresight, precision, and daring. By the end of the 1967 to 1968 seasons, the impact was undeniable. Pit stops, once an immutable part of racing, had been challenged, redefined, and in many ways, made optional for those with the vision and audacity to think differently. Smokey Yunick's 11-foot fuel line and cooled fuel system weren't just a clever trick, they were a manifesto of innovation, a testament to a mind that refused to bow to convention. In every curve taken, every lap extended, and every rival left wondering how such a machine could exist, Smokey's genius spoke louder than any engine roar. In racing, the rules might guide the race, but vision could change it forever. Understanding Smokey Yunick's innovation requires stepping inside the mind of a mechanic who didn't just fix problems, he rewrote the rules of possibility. On paper, his 11-foot, 2-inch fuel line reservoir with cooled fuel seemed like a simple idea, but in execution, it was a symphony of precision, calculation, and ingenuity. Every detail mattered: the size of the tubing, the angle of bends, the placement of valves, and the integration with each car's engine. On the Chevrolet Chevelle, his main NASCAR weapon, the system allowed fuel to flow with unprecedented consistency, feeding the small block V8 327 and 427 cubic inches at a steady optimal pressure, lap after lap. The trick began with the reservoir itself, a colossal 11-foot line, unusually wide in diameter, designed to hold far more fuel than conventional setups. This was no mere extension, it was a carefully engineered buffer that stored an enormous volume, effectively giving the car a mobile gas tank. But length alone wasn't enough. Fuel density and temperature had to be controlled meticulously. Too warm, and performance would suffer. Too cold, and viscosity could choke the engine. Smokey introduced a cooling mechanism that maintained ideal fuel conditions throughout the race, ensuring that every combustion cycle produced maximum power. The result, a car that could lap faster and longer than rivals without once slowing for fuel. The Pontiac Firebird, Smokey's Trans Am masterpiece, posed a different challenge. Its Pontiac 303 V8 had unique requirements, demanding precise calibration to handle the same fuel system without risking engine stress. By experimenting with pipe routing and thermal dissipation, Smokey created a network of interconnected lines that balanced fuel flow, maintained temperature, and minimized vapor lock. The Pontiac Firebird, Smokey's Trans Am masterpiece, posed a different challenge. Its Pontiac 303 V8 had unique requirements, demanding precise calibration to handle the same fuel system without risking engine stress. By experimenting with pipe routing and thermal dissipation, Smokey created a network of interconnected lines that balanced fuel flow, maintained temperature, and minimized vapor lock. Each curve, each bend, and each segment of tubing was calculated to reduce turbulence and maintain a constant, controlled supply to the engine. Even minor supporting cars like the late 1960s Chevrolet Camaro served as testing grounds, contributing insights that refined pressure distribution and reservoir efficiency. Every car in his stable became a node in the grand experiment. But the magic wasn't purely technical, it was strategic. By extending the car's fuel autonomy, Smokey essentially turned pit stops from a fixed necessity into a tactical choice. The Chevelle could continue racing at full throttle while other teams were forced to slow down, refuel, or risk overheating. Laps that once were lost to logistical delays were now a domain for Smokey's genius. It wasn't just the fuel line, it was the synchronization of engine tuning, weight distribution, and thermal management, a holistic approach that transformed performance into a seamless, relentless flow. Competitors could see the difference immediately. While others prepared for the standard rhythm of stop, refuel, and accelerate, Smokey's cars moved uninterrupted. Gordon Johncock's Daytona 500 car, though briefly mentioned, symbolized the opposition, powerful, prepared, but ultimately bound by convention. Smokey's Chevelle and Firebird, in contrast, seemed almost alive, responding flawlessly to every corner, every straightaway, every burst of acceleration. Their engines fed consistently by a system that was as audacious as it was brilliant. In essence, the trick worked because Smokey approached racing as an interconnected system rather than isolated components. Fuel lines, reservoirs, engine behavior, and chassis dynamics were all treated as variables in a single equation. By controlling each variable to perfection, he produced an outcome that seemed impossible. Cars that could race longer, faster, and more efficiently than any standard approach allowed. It was a mechanical ballet, invisible to the untrained eye, but devastatingly effective on the track. And in every lap completed without pause, Smokey Yunick's ingenuity left its mark. Quiet, calculated, and undeniably legendary. The moment Smokey Yunick's Chevelle and Firebird hit the track with his 11-foot fuel line and cooled fuel system, the rules of racing subtly began to bend. It wasn't immediately obvious to spectators, but teams quickly realized something extraordinary was happening. Cars that should have slowed or pitted repeatedly were instead maintaining astonishing speeds lap after lap. Every turn, every straightaway, every acceleration became a testament to engineering brilliance, and every second that ticked by highlighted the disparity between convention and innovation. Smokey had not just improved performance, he had rewritten the very rhythm of the race. For the Chevrolet Chevelle, the impact was profound. Its small block V8, fed with cooled fuel through the massive reservoir, delivered power consistently, never faltering under pressure. While competitors calculated lap times and pit intervals, the Chevelle blazed past, seemingly untouched by the logistical constraints that bound everyone else. On the Trans Am side, the 1968 Pontiac Firebird benefited similarly, demonstrating that Smokey's genius was not confined to a single racing series. Its Pontiac 303 V8 responded flawlessly, combining explosive short-distance speed with endurance and showing that even secondary machines could redefine expectations when engineered with audacity. The subtle contributions of supporting cars like the late 1960s Chevrolet Camaro became clear in hindsight. Each minor experiment, each calibration tweak, contributed to a broader understanding of performance dynamics. Smokey's iterative approach allowed him to refine every detail, producing a suite of machines that collectively dominated their respective fields. Where other teams saw incremental improvements, Smokey achieved exponential gains. Every component was designed to reduce downtime, maximize efficiency, and keep cars moving at peak performance, essentially eliminating the traditional setbacks that came with pit stops. The ripple effect extended beyond mechanics and machines. Drivers, engineers, and crews who witnessed the Chevelle and Firebird in action could only marvel at the seamless integration of innovation and execution. Gordon Johncock's Daytona 500 car, while a formidable competitor, highlighted the stark contrast. Conventional teams were bound by standard refueling cycles, engine cooling limits, and performance fluctuations. Smokey's vehicles operated on a different plane, a realm where precision engineering and audacious creativity merged to create a seemingly unstoppable force. Strategically, the consequences were just as impressive. By effectively sidestepping the time lost in pit stops, Smokey's cars could dictate race pace, pressure opponents, and control outcomes without relying on chance or reaction. Races became not just a test of speed, but of foresight, planning, and clever design. Every lap completed without interruption was a demonstration of Smokey's holistic approach, considering fuel flow, engine behavior, chassis dynamics, and cooling as an interconnected system. What competitors had taken for granted as limitations were transformed into opportunities for dominance. Ultimately, the impact of Smokey Yunick's innovation was not merely measured in victories or lap times, it was cultural, psychological, and legendary. His cars became symbols of what could be achieved when rules were bent, creativity was unbounded, and genius was applied fearlessly. The Chevelle, the Firebird, and even minor supporting cars like the Camaro etched their place in racing history, not because they were the fastest by standard metrics, but because they operated in a realm few others dared to explore. Every race demonstrated a new paradigm. When mechanics think beyond convention, the impossible becomes inevitable. Smokey Yunick's genius wasn't measured in trophies alone. It was measured in the reverence, awe, and whispers that echoed through the paddocks long after the races ended. The Chevelle, the Firebird, and even the supporting Camaros weren't just cars. They were living proof that one mind could bend the rules of possibility. Drivers, engineers, and fans alike came to understand that when Smokey touched a machine, it wasn't merely prepared for a race. It was elevated into a level of performance that seemed almost supernatural. The combination of his outlaw ingenuity, meticulous engineering, and daring creativity transformed him from a mechanic into a legend. The Chevrolet Chevelle became the emblem of his mastery. Each race it dominated carried Smokey's fingerprint. The long fuel lines, the cooled reservoirs, the tuned small block V8s operating flawlessly, without pause. Its presence on the NASCAR Grand National tracks sent a message to everyone. Speed and endurance could coexist in ways previously thought impossible. Meanwhile, the 1968 Pontiac Firebird in the Trans Am series earned recognition not just as a secondary machine, but as Smokey's perfect balance of power and precision. Its Pontiac 303 V8 roared with authority, a testament to calculated innovation and unyielding attention to detail. Even the supporting cars like the late 1960s Chevrolet Camaro played their part in solidifying Smokey's legacy. Every test, every tweak, every minor modification fed into the broader body of knowledge that made his primary machines unstoppable. Competitors could only watch and learn, realizing that the difference between victory and defeat wasn't always in horsepower or driver skill, it was in vision. Smokey Yunick had a vision few could comprehend, and even fewer could execute. His influence extended far beyond individual races. Mechanics and engineers studying his techniques were inspired to rethink conventional wisdom. Fuel lines could be extended, thermal management could be precise, and engines could sustain performance far beyond expected limits. Yet it wasn't mere mimicry that made Smokey's work legendary, it was the audacity, the boldness of trying what no one else dared. Each car that rolled off his workshop floor carried a philosophy: innovation thrives where rules are challenged, and greatness belongs to those willing to redefine the limits. The psychological impact on competitors was profound. Gordon Johncock's Daytona 500 car and other rivals became benchmarks against which the ingenuity of Smokey's machines was measured. Observing the seamless performance of his cars, even for a moment, forced respect and recalibrated expectations. Smokey didn't just win races, he won a place in racing culture, a status that elevated him from a brilliant mechanic to a legend whose methods would be studied, celebrated, and revered for generations. In retrospect, the era of Smokey Yunick's innovation wasn't just about cars or races. It was a narrative of vision meeting execution, of audacity meeting precision, and of one man's refusal to accept limitations as reality. The Chevelle, Firebird, and supporting Camaros weren't just machines. They were extensions of his mind, embodiments of his creativity, and symbols of what happens when one individual dares to think differently. By challenging conventions, Smokey didn't just alter race outcomes, he redefined the very meaning of innovation in motorsport, and that legacy endures, immortalized in every daring modification, every audacious idea, and every race car that dares to push beyond the expected. Smokey Yunick's Chevelle and Firebird proved that genius and audacity can rewrite racing history. Every lap, every innovation, turned limits into legend. If you're inspired by his daring creations, hit like, subscribe, and share which of Smokey's machines you'd race, because true innovation never stops.